receive $4,000.
Huang Chan changes his mind after saying no to cash handouts. Good evening. U.S. President Donald Trump has signed an executive order that paves the way for imposing tariffs on as $60 billion worth of Chinese imports. China responded with a $3 billion list of U.S. goods that may be hit with higher tariffs as a trade war looks more and more likely. Alan Butnia reports.
Donald Trump said he wants to punish Beijing for what he calls the theft of American technology and Chinese pressure on U.S. companies to hand it over. He's also making good on a campaign promise to try to reduce the trade deficit with China.
But we have a trade deficit, depending on the way you calculate, of $504 billion. Now, some people would say it's really $375 billion. Many different ways of looking at it, but any way you look at it, it is the largest deficit of any country in the history of our world. It's out of control.
In Beijing, the Ministry of Commerce announced a $3 billion list of goods it may target with higher tariffs. That includes U.S. beef, pork, steel, and aluminum, products from farm areas that voted for the president in 2016. China's ambassador to the U.S. said a trade war won't help anybody.
It makes no sense. It makes no political sense either. So the end result will be hurting everybody. It will certainly affect the daily life of the American middle-class people.
The new tariffs follow already announced duties on Chinese steel and aluminum. This economist thinks tariffs are the wrong way to address the trade deficit.
So you want to actually find a way to level the playing field, grow high, increase jobs, increase wages, and usually restricting imports, exports is not the way to do that. So you want to expand market access, and you want to expand the opportunities in which your nation, the United States, has a comparative advantage. And that tends not to be with line manufacturing.
Meanwhile, a group of 25 major U.S. retailers, including Walmart, Costco, and Best Buy, are urging the Trump administration not to follow through on the tariffs. They're concerned about the negative impact they'll have on American working families through the higher cost of cheap goods coming from China. Alan Butnia, TVB News.
Meanwhile, Donald Trump said he'll pause on steel and aluminium tariffs for the European Union, South Korea, Australia, Argentina, and Brazil, in addition to Canada and Mexico. The tariffs of 25% on steel and 10% on aluminium are mainly aimed at China for flooding the world market. But China accounts for just 2% of those metals imported to the U.S. Trump decided to exempt the other countries while they are in various stages of trade talks with Washington. Canada and Mexico were exempted earlier as efforts are being made to negotiate the North American Free Trade Agreement. European stock markets are broadly lower as fears of a global trade war sent investors running for cover. Today, Asian stocks took a hammering after Beijing threatened to retaliate against Washington's sanctions. John reports.
U.S. President Donald Trump sounded the drumbeat of a trade war by inking a memorandum that could impose tariffs on up to $60 billion of Chinese imports. Beijing threatened to slap its own import duties on U.S. goods, but it hopes that Washington will use a 30-day consultation period to review the situation before these take effect. As expected, stock markets fell victim to the feuding superpowers, starting with Wall Street. The Dow Jones tanked more than 700 points, or nearly 3%, and that sentiment rippled across the globe today. With the local dollar pegged to the greenback, there was no escaping the sell-off in Hong Kong. After opening down 1,140 points, the Hang Seng Index recouped some of the losses but closed near its intraday high. Still, the benchmark lost 161 points, or 2.5%, to finish at 30,309. Turnover ballooned to a massive $283 billion as investors trimmed their portfolios. It was the second highest daily turnover in history. Tencent plunged 4.4% as one of the market's top drags, a day after the sale of a 2% stake by substantial shareholder Naspers.
The Hang Seng Index is showing very strong support level at the 30,000 level, but I think when investors seeing the rebound going to 31,000 level, they will start to unload some of the shares they previously buy in. So I think we should sell some stock at that level.
Fears of a possible trade war saw a sharp sell-off in mainland markets, which suffered their biggest one-day drop in 6 weeks. The Shanghai Composite plunged 3.6% to 3,153 points. Bond yields also fell as investors rushed into less risky assets. Elsewhere in the region, Japan's Nikkei 225 plunged 4.5% as investors flocked to the yen. The traditional safe haven currency to a 17-month high against the US dollar. South Korea's Kospi tumbled 3.2%, while Australia's S&P ASX 200 ended nearly 2% lower. Jeff Tang, TVB News.
3 people were killed and wounded by gunmen in a hostage drama in southwestern France. Authorities are calling the incident a terrorist attack. The gunman held up a car, opened fire on police, then took hostages in a supermarket, screaming, "God is great" in Arabic. The man reportedly claimed allegiance to Islamic State. He demanded the release of Salah Abdeslam, the prime surviving suspect in the Islamic State attacks in Paris in 2015 that killed 130 people. Officials confirmed the attacker was killed when officers stormed the supermarket. Back locally, Financial Secretary Paul Chan announced a major supplement to this year's budget. He's decided to give a $4,000 cash handout to about a third of the population. So there will be cash handouts after all. Financial Secretary Paul Chan today announced up to $4,000 for people who did not benefit from his budget last month. It's a U-turn from the government's previously staunch rejection of this method of spending. About 2.8 million people will benefit. And here are the requirements. In order to be eligible, the person must be at least 18 years old by the end of this year. He or she should be a resident of Hong Kong, does not own any property, and does not receive any government allowances. Those who will not be paying income tax for the financial year, which ends next week, will get the full $4,000. As for people who will be paying the tax, if the concession they get is below $4,000, they will get the difference between the two amounts. Chan also noted a small number of people who don't pay tax and live in self-owned domestic properties. If these people get less than $4,000 in tax and rate concessions, they will also get the difference between the two amounts. It's estimated the government will spend $11 billion on this. Chan's February budget was criticized for being not inclusive enough. Both he and Chief Executive Carrie Lam denied the government is backtracking on previous vows. There would be no mass cash handouts.
The scheme that I just outlined is a targeted scheme, trying to seek to cover more people who may not be able to benefit directly from the various measures in the regional budget.
I wouldn't say that we are bowing to pressure. And secondly, we have not said we will not do something, which we describe as a share and care program.
Some lawmakers applauded the move, while others felt $4,000 is not enough. The last time something similar happened was in 2011. Back then, most residents over the age of 18 were entitled to a $6,000 cash handout. Lawmakers highlighted gray areas today in the local version of the national anthem law. But the government says as long as people truly respect the anthem, no one has to worry about the so-called pitfalls of the law. Christy Lung reports.
The proposed legislation was debated for the first time at a electoral panel meeting. The legislation states that disrespecting the anthem could result in a maximum penalty of 3 years in prison and a fine of $15,000. Constitutional and Mainland Affairs Patrick Nip said the public has nothing to worry about as long as people truly respect the anthem. So lawmakers asked what actions would be deemed disrespectful.
You have people using a loudspeaker to play the national anthem, such as filibustering in this council. Would other people be required to stand in respect? We have to refer to Article 15 to see whether anyone deliberately do something to derogate, to distort the national.
The minister says the government has an exhaustive list of all acts that could be deemed as derogatory. Some disagreed with making it mandatory for local schools to teach students our still national anthem.
You are not respecting the autonomy of teachers, and then teachers may have worries whether they are doing a good enough job in teaching the national anthem. Would that lead to the fear or litigations? Because we are implementing a piece of national law, and such an article, such a requirement in the national law, therefore we need to have a corresponding provision. But we do not specify how this is to be done.
Nip pledged to listen to the public's views in Lachko, besides questions about a public consultation on the issue. TVB News.
Overseas again to another staff shakeup in the White House. President Donald Trump is replacing his national security advisor with a man tough on North Korea and an advocate of military intervention. Sonia Antero reports.
H.R. McMaster is out and John Bolton is in. That from Trump's latest tweet as he thanked McMaster for doing an outstanding job. Trump repeatedly clashed with McMaster, a respected three-star general. His departure follows Trump's dramatic ousting of Secretary of State Rex Tillerson last week. Bolton will be Trump's third national security advisor. McMaster replaced the first one, Michael Flynn, who was dismissed after less than a month in office. The former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations described what his role will entail.
One is to make sure that the president is presented with all of the options and a plus and minuses of each of them so that he can make a fully informed decision.
On worries that Trump is starting a trade war with China, Bolton supports the decision.
Well, I think the president was sending China a signal, and I don't think anybody wants a trade war. I think what we want is for China to comply with its commitments, its international commitments, which in many respects it is not.
Bolton served under three Republican presidents: Ronald Reagan, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. Like Trump, Bolton is an outspoken critic of the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Trump had campaigned against the deal and vowed to end it until McMaster and Tillerson delayed the move. With both out of the way, Trump has signaled he's eager to make good on his Iran promise. Bolton is also a strong supporter of the Iraq War and an advocate for aggressive use of American power in foreign policy. Case in point, while McMaster believes war with North Korea should be the last resort, Bolton disagrees. In 2009, Bolton insisted Pyongyang was an imminent threat to America due to its goal of targeting the U.S. mainland with nuclear warheads.
What I think to be the real fundamental objective of American policy, which is squeezing North Korea to the point that the regime falters and that China's pressure can make the difference over the long term to achieve the objective.
69-year-old Bolton will begin his post on April 9th. Sonia Artero, TVB News.
Former South Korean President Lee Myung-bak has been detained on charges of taking bribes while he was in office. Tony Sabine reports.
They came for him soon after the stroke of midnight.
Today, former South Korean President Lee Myung-bak was arrested and jailed over a range of corruption allegations stemming from his time in office between 2008 and 2013. He's the latest in a series of disgraced South Korean leaders embroiled in scandals and other problems after leaving office. A convoy of vehicles, including one carrying Lee, entered a detention center after a Seoul court approved his arrest warrant. It cited what it called serious alleged crimes and a possibility that he might try to destroy evidence. Prosecutors can detain him for up to 20 days before formally charging him. In a statement released before he was taken into custody, he said he blamed himself for the trouble he is in. He hoped his arrest would relieve the pain to his family and those who worked with him. Prosecutors accused Lee of taking $10 million in bribes from his own intelligence agency, business groups and others. They allege he also used a private company as a channel to establish illicit slush funds totaling $33 million, embezzle its official funds and evade taxes. Lee's arrest comes about 1 year after his successor, Park Geun-hye, was ousted from office and put into jail over a separate corruption scandal that triggered months of street protests. Prosecutors have requested a 30-year prison term for Park, and the Seoul court is to issue a ruling on her on April the 6th. Tony Savoy, TVB News.
Look at the weather before we go. It'll be mainly fine with temperatures between 19 and 24 degrees. And that's the news for now. Thanks for watching. Good night.